answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
We are the Mad Men of Masculinity.
Your home for healthy masculinity. We're just real men having real conversations for you.
Pew, pew, pew. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Oh, yeah, I like that part. You can't handle the truth. How many people can't handle the truth, man? Most people.
Most people.
Hey,
Most
if you
people
don't know,
can't
here's some truth. Truth is, I am Kirk M. Samuels.
And the truth is, I am Jason B. Kendrick.
That's right. And we are the Mad Men of Masculinity, baby.
That's right. We're just real men having real conversations for you. And this one is going to be real to the real cubed. Because if you didn't watch Mondays, you need to go back and watch Mondays. We're going to try to condense this down, but we brought our man back. He's so good.
Yeah, bring him on, man. Bring him on. Come on. I need him. Come on, man.
I like
there,
your pew,
there
pew,
he is. I
pew.
bet you're going to scoot us around.
That's a great intro.
There he is. Oh, he's coming. There he is. There he is. There's the guy.
Place of honor.
There's the guy. You know what I'm saying? So, I think our shows are kind of getting better, man, in terms of topics, in terms of all that kind of stuff. And we had a real one just here, a few days ago this week as we record this. And so if you haven't yet seen it, go look at the hour-long version, the studio version show that we recorded, man. It was absolutely fantastic. We dug into the topic of human trafficking, kind of, in response or in the same universe as the Sound of Freedom movie that's out now, and all the buzz about that is one of those. You got to go see it. If you haven't seen it, you got to go see it. We talked in depth about that in the last one, and then one of the guys I've known, we're getting pretty close to a decade by now. And we related in the last show. We related that the premise behind the movie was, South America was like international human trafficking. And we connected those dots with that and what's happening in your local backyard, specifically, here in the Denver metro area. There is no person, I believe, more qualified to talk about human trafficking in the Denver metro area than John DeYoung. I just believe that, and I bet you I could come up with a petition of 100 people in the next 3 hours that would say the same thing as well, man. And so we're not going to go way into all the details that we did last time. Go back and watch that. It was dope. John's the man. Not only did he spend a lot of time in the human trafficking or anti-human trafficking realm here in Denver, but nowadays, he has a water company where he's bringing water internationally and locally to folks that need it. And we'll even drop a little video about that here in a little bit, with Vivo Blue. And so he's just doing like a dynamic stuff, but he has a unique perspective, not only internationally, but locally. And, not only is he a deep man, he's a man of faith. He's a father. He's a husband. I mean, he's just a good guy all around. But he has a different perspective, man, on a whole lot of things that I think it just makes this a great opportunity to kind of scratch the surface on another aspect of that conversation. So that was a really long intro.
That was long, but man, that's really humbling, Kirk. You and Jason have a really great show. When you think about like Men of Masculinity and what we're doing in Mad Men of Masculinity, it's like, hey, we really have to step into these spaces and really, know who we are. And I love the fact that you guys are doing this show. I recommend this show to anyone out there, women, men, everyone should be listening to this show. And you guys are doing some really cool topics. And I'm glad to be talking about this today as well. So I'm excited to be back on here. Thanks, guys. Well,
thank you so much for changing your schedule around. I mean, after our last we're going to have to go Joe Rogan style one of these days and just do a 4-hour podcast. Because, we could have gone on for days on Monday. So we wanted to bring you back, but we wanted to get into we love to do the how-tos and the kind of what do we do about it talks. And that's what I wanted this to be, because like Kirk's brought up on Monday, it's a supply and demand issue. And the U.S. is now the number one demander of sex trafficking and all the sex related depravity and stuff. And so I know you have both done work with people to get them off pornography and to help them in those ways. And that's what I wanted to really if we weren't as men trying to be healthy men, if we weren't consuming pornography and all of these things that kind of become that slippery slope of sex trafficking, then maybe we can like pull that, cog out of the machine and start slowing this machine down a little bit. And, because if there's no money to be made, then, they won't be doing what they're doing. So let's dig into like, how do we as men start to slow down the sex trafficking? What can we do just as individuals, as men, to do our part, really?
I think that's a great question because not everyone's a law enforcement person. We're not not everyone's a trauma counselor, or we're not going in as Navy SEALs or some of my friends are in ex-military. They're actually doing the real hard work, going straight into these brothels and rescuing these women and children. And we're talking kids. I think one of the things is what's cool about your name of your thing is called masculinity. And so your show is called that. And so we need to understand that if you're a protector and a provider, if you're a protector and a provider and you live in that and you believe that, and we're all made in the image of God, we're all made equal, woman, man, child, whatever. When you get those basic foundations, that's actually some of the very first steps of reducing the sexual purchasing of all the things, right? Because if I see you, Jason, and you, Kirk, and my wife and my children and my friends and their wives and their children as equals, and I'm also a protector and provider of my family, my wife, my children, I'm a protector and provider for you. Kirk, I'd die for you. Jason, I'd die for you. If your child was in danger, I'd die for them. I'd protect them, right? If there was risk or if there was someone trying to prey on them, I would be a protector, right? Kirk, if something happened to your family or you, I come in and step in and try to be a provider at the same time. Like, how do we do that? Right. So if we as men, because we are the majority of the demand, right? No one's Apple only. Oh, there they are. Look how cute they are. See, there's my wife. I didn't mean to pop up. That wasn't a plug. That was not a plug. And actually, the person who was texting there, she is the founder of Rescue America. She's like, bummer, I'm not going to see you tonight. But I told her what I was doing. She's like, that's awesome. Tell Kirk I said hi, And so we're all in this together. And I think those are some basic foundations made in an image of God, right? Men and women are equal. Children are equal. They have a right to life. We have a right to freedom. We don't have a right, and we learn to stop oppressing. And then the other thing is, it's just to sort of start in your head and go, okay, I know I'm a broken man. I know I'm a physical guy who sees things and I like the tight butt, or I like the boobs, or I like this, or I like the body parts, but it takes a mental captive of your thoughts, hold captive your thoughts, and know where it's going to take you. It never takes you to a good place. And so starting in masculinity, because again, I go back to, I'm a man, so I tend to sort of say, hey, the buck stops here, right? I'm also a leader in my company. And I don't want to be the guy that's like, well, that guy, whether that's true or not, I still am the leader of my company. And I can be like, you know what? I played a part in that. I didn't train that person well. I didn't explain the mission, or I didn't explain the vision. I didn't make the meeting. I have to take ownership of a lot of things. And so I think the culture today is throwing away responsibility, accountability, all that stuff, right? And we're just being sucked in by the perversion and being okay with it. And so the demand is growing. So the sell has to match, right? The supply has to match the demand. Otherwise, the company or the entity called sex trafficking can't survive. And so if men stepped in, right? If men stepped in and understood their masculine role, and what that means, there'd be a lot less women and children to sell.
Yeah. Well,
one of the things you said was that you talked about, you said the buck stops here. And as soon as you said that, it hit me that the buck also starts here, meaning like it is up to men to be the lead, the tip of the spear in setting the bar, setting the standard, and to go in and be the hero. I mean, even back to the movie, back to the premise of the movie Sound of Freedom, it was a man that said, somebody's got to do something, and that somebody needs to be me. I'm not saying that a woman couldn't, but I'm saying if you think about it, it is masculinity that says, no, I have to get my butt on a plane, and I got to go down here and solve this problem because this is a wrong that needs to be righted. And so it is up to us as men to start that process, as well as kind of be the backstop of this is also where it ends. Like the problem ends with me. And when I wake up in the morning and say this problem, whatever this problem is, ends with me, then that's when the world begins to change, because the buck also starts right here.
Yeah. If Jeffrey Epstein was a different man, there would be no Maxine. If Jeffrey Epstein was a different man, there would be no Maxine. Right. And if all the men who went to his island were different men, there would be no Jeffrey Epstein. Right. And so like it's the business. It's this business. And we have to understand it is a legitimate crime business. It is as intricate, if not more intricate, than drug sales globally.
So I want to play devil's advocate for a minute. So for a man who realizes, maybe he's a part of the system, or he's consuming, or he's addicted to pornography, or, and in our country, we're finding more and more men like that because, nice guy syndrome, plus with the feminist movement and ladies not needing men anymore, they're not finding their role. They're not finding that place to be the protector and provider. So what would you say to guys? Because, we talked about it after the last show, like, guys who are kind of in that user consumer base, and they have great responses. They always have a good reason. Well, why would I spend this money and all this time on this unknown who's not a sure thing, where I could just go over here and then it's a sure thing, quote unquote? What would you say to those guys to kind of help them, open their eyes, or to, start making those changes?
I used to teach high school boys and girls, hip hop, dance, and film, and all that stuff. And we did a couple anti-trafficking films with some of our students, and we introduced them to the shift movement. And one of the things I talked to the young men about who struggled with, hey, either I'm not attractive, or I'm struggling here, or girls in high school are really stupid, just all the things, right? Boys are even dumber, all of that sort of there. And when it came to conversations around, like, how do you guys look at women and all of this stuff? What do you see? Because most of them, if not all of them, are watching some sort of pornography, whether it was soft or hardcore, or, Kirk says it's a real quick dive to the darkest of the darkest parts of porn. I go back to, again, going back to you as a human, saying, if you are objectifying a girl, whether it's on the screen or at a party or whatever, in order to objectify someone, my belief is you have to first objectify yourself. So if a girl is only a vagina and boobs and a good time, you're only a weenie and a butt and a good time, or a nice chest, or whatever it is, right? Because if you consider yourself full human, full developed, fully designed, less chance. I'm not saying it won't, less chance. When I was a hip hop dancer, I didn't understand my design. I thought I was a hip hop dancer. Right. I didn't realize that I was a child of God. I was also broken, but I was also saved, and I was also built for a purpose. And when I objectified the girls I danced with, or my girlfriends, or whoever I was with at the club, I was just a sex object too. I was only good for alcohol and sex. I didn't see myself going any farther than that. Like, I saw myself on the weekend. I saw myself at the performance. I saw myself talking to the cute girls after the show, signing autographs and trying to hook up with them. That's all I could see myself as. And so I took that lesson of my degradation of who I was, and just my internal turmoil pushed me towards suicide, because I had that tension and struggles. Like, God, you told me I was made for more than this. I don't believe you, because all I'm doing is this. You know what I'm saying? And so when I talk to the young girls or talk to the young boys or even college kids now, I'm like going, if you struggle in this area or this, one of the things is to seek deeply. In order to objectify something, I think first and foremost, you objectify yourself. Now, do I walk down the street and see a very attractive girl and I take a look and all that stuff? What am I thinking? I'm not thinking of my whole self. I'm only thinking of that one portion, which again is objectifying yourself. You've come down to like a piece of thing, right? And you know, and I always have to, you know, walk myself through that, and it's something there. And then when you're talking about this feminist movement and the way it's sort of working, it's very difficult. My brother-in-law sometimes would say, like, man, I don't know where I sit with some of these women. It's so difficult, right? How can I be masculine if they're not going to let me? You know? And so I think for women, you got to relax. Yeah. You're different than men. You're supposed to complement each other, not be each other. That's really weird. You know what I'm saying? We're supposed to complement each other. There's things that I am not and a woman is, and that is beautiful. That's amazing. That's unique. It's stellar. It's the way it's designed. And then there's things that I am that she's not, right? And that's beautiful. And we're supposed to celebrate that. And as we come together, we're complimenting each other, you know? And there is something to say, you know, and Jerry Maguire, you complete me. To a degree, I know I was a little bit ahead of the game. Like, she was like, you complete me. She didn't even know him. But there is something about women and men when we're doing it in the right way. We really do. We really do come together and be this one. Yeah. Under God, right? It's so freaking cool. But we're broken, and it's really hard.
Hey, you talk about doing it the right way, man. One of the things you're doing the right way is your water company, man. And since we're on the short track here this afternoon, I'd like to see if we can maybe share with some folks like the things you're doing with your company. Is that cool?
Yeah, go ahead.
Boom.
What are we gonna do? The tap water's contaminated.
Well, we can't drink the tap water, and we're out of bottled water, so we need a solution fast.
Are you tired of being unprepared during times of emergency? Do you worry about your drinking water? Well, we have the solution for you. Introducing the Vivo Blue Core Family Backpack and Water Filter. This powerful and versatile water filter is perfect for emergency preparedness and boiler alerts. With this fast and simple design, you can have clean water in just seconds.
We can now have safe drinking water even during a crisis. Thank you, Mr. Vivo Blue.
I don't know what you're talking about, man. You're a great actor.
I know, man. I love that.
I look
dude.
at that.
I
and
love
I'm
that.
like, oh, I cringe.
I love that, dude. I mean, I think that's fantastic, man. Like I said, I'm so proud of you as a friend and as a brother and the stuff you do. And
I'm proud
you know,
of
like
you,
I said,
brother,
globally, you've had those things in the Ukraine. You know, you just got back from India and all those kinds of things, and so you're really doing some good stuff. And I hope some folks can kind of check out your website and everything that you're doing, man, because it is some phenomenal stuff. You know, one of the things I thought about just in the context of this conversation, you know, to me, the opposite of being a consumer is being a producer. And on top of being a protector, a provider, and a priest in the home, I think we should also, as men, as masculine men, be producers. Producers in the home, producers in the world, and all those kinds of things. And I think when you're in the space of producing something, you're probably less likely in the space of being a consumer and just consuming everything.
I think you're absolutely right. I love that when you're in a space of thinking forward, right? Because when you think forward, and you're talking about the producer, I love what you're saying there, because you're designing something. If you're designing something in your family or in the next generation or in your children, right? Because it takes generations for things like this to sort of break apart, right? I would love to say tomorrow, guys, stop buying. And then just bam, right? And then we can go help all the children and all the victims and figure out how to deal with the trauma in that sense. And you know, but if we think as masculine producers in the family, in our jobs, in our communities, You're thinking forward. You're a forward thinker. You're an innovative thinker. You're a thought leader. And as you do that, then your actions and your behaviors and your characters start to shift and shape as you're walking through these things. And so if you want a world that isn't oppressive and isn't abusing and isn't stealing and robbing these children and these women and young boys of their innocence and their lives, because remember, I think we said last time, an average victim only lives 7 years. So they are on their way to death, and you're participating in that. When you're watching porn, you're participating in that. When you're at a massage parlor getting a happy ending, you're participating in that. Like you can't just go, nah, it doesn't matter. It matters because it matters to that person, right? So when we do mission trips a lot, there's always that story of like, well, you know, there's so many people who need help, and you go to India and there's millions and millions of, you know, what does it matter? Well, there's that story, a parable of like a man walking on the beach with another person, and there's millions of starfish, and he picks it up and he throws it back into the ocean. The guy's like, what, why does that matter? Why would you throw one in? It doesn't matter. And he goes, it matters to that person, right? It matters to that starfish. It matters the world to that starfish. So same thing here is we be like, oh, it's such a big deal. What does it matter? It matters to that 6-year-old boy or that 8-year-old girl who's being raped 8, 10, 12 times a day. It matters to her and him. It matters to that 21-year-old girl, 30-year-old woman who's been trapped in it for years. It matters. And honestly, it matters to the traffickers. Really? It matters to them as well. Mm-hmm. You know? What's hard about this is it's the word of God says, love your enemies. That's hard. That's hard, right? And that's really hard for me because of the people I know who's been in this industry and the women and children and all that. But it matters. It does. It does matter to that 8-year-old girl. For the next 7 to 10 years, will be raped 8 to 10 times a day. It matters. You can't say it doesn't matter. So,
yeah. You know, I when you talk about producing, one of the things I think we can produce, and when I say producing, obviously I'm not talking about like producing porn or nothing. I'm talking about producing, creating something great, creating something, you know, that outlives you in a good way. And I look at the two of you, and it just popped into my head that one of the things that we can maybe have an influence on producing is the next generation of males, the next generation of men, the next generation of masculinity. I mean, John, not only have you done that through, you know, back when you were a teacher and you know, a leader of youth in these movements and all that kind of stuff, but now you're a father, and now you got your son breakdancing in the living room. You know, I mean, and then, you know, but then I take so somebody says, well, I don't have a kid. Well, then I look on the other side of the screen, and I see, you know, Jason here, who took 24 hours out of his life a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and became part of this, you know, this rite of passage thing that I did. I mean, you know, this guy didn't have a son. He didn't have a son, but he was there, like, you know, the whole time in that whole thing. So, you know, we can absolutely be part of producing, if nothing else, the next generation of healthy masculinity. And whether it's a son or whether it's just being an upstanding figure in our community, we can absolutely be producers of something for sure.
Absolutely. Kirk, what would you say to men out there right now who are watching pornography or struggling in this area? You're an expert in that. Like, what would you give as a small, you know, just that little gold nugget that they can hold on to of some sort of hope to, because, you know, the men don't want to be there. So like, what would be good for them to hear today?
First and foremost, you know, been there, done that. 30 of the first 40 years of my life, I was hooked on that. And you know, and I like to say, it sounds weird. It sounds weird maybe in the beginning for the first half a second or two, but I'm not anti-porn. I'm pro-freedom. And I hate the idea of slavery. And it's a slippery slope to consume something that is virtual and everywhere. And that is free. It's the only drug that's free and unlimited ever in history. Is a slippery slope to go from just a casual consumer to an absolute, I'm going to say addiction, meaning I can't stop, or slavery even to that thing. And so the reality is, man, there's so much greater than being confined to a screen. these are two-dimensional things. This, what we're looking at here is we're three-dimensional beings,
creatures,
right?
Yep.
And so there's no fulfillment in consuming something that's less than what we are. And so there's a level of connection, a level of vulnerability, a level of intimacy that exists beyond this two-dimensional consumption palette that we do. There's a level of connection. I never thought I'd be able to have relationship with a woman, relationship with friends, relationships with other men in healthy ways that like I do now. And it was because I was so trapped and fixated in the consumption of sexuality. And there's a level of freedom that you can't even understand, comprehend when we confine ourselves, when we try to pack, 3 dimensions of us into a 2-dimensional kind of experience, and something that it leads to isolation, and it leads to some level of disconnection and non-humanity. And I got a call. One of the last calls I got was from a guy who got busted by the cops, because he got online surfing and turfing, and next thing you know, he was meeting an underaged female, and showed up, and woo, and next thing you know, this married guy, next thing you know, him and his wife are in the middle of this legal, not only relationship, but a legal battle and all these other kind of things. It's just a slippery slope. And I'm telling you, man, there's a level of connection and intimacy, the intimacy that you're really looking for in your heart and in your soul and in your spirit, that exists beyond the simple day-to-day masturbation of life.
Yeah. Oh, that's all good words, man. I love that. I think that's something that, not most people think they'll go down that road. It's hard for us to see us 3, 4 years, 5 years down the road, 20 years down the road. Like, I didn't know when I started clubbing at a young age and then taking advantage of women that I would be that kind of guy. Like, I never predicted I'd be that guy. I didn't want to, if you were to say, John, you're gonna be a real jerk in about 5 years, and you're gonna be depressed, and you're gonna be an alcoholic, and you're gonna be having a gun to your head, I think I would have changed course, right? But I didn't know the slippery slope that I was going to, because I was filled in my own ego. I was filled in my own bull. I was just selfish, and I couldn't get out of it, and I got lost in this jungle of perversion, and it was scary. It was dangerous. It was oddly weird. And when I ended up in a place at 27, young, with a gun to my head, saying I can't live like this, I would have never done it if I would have known that the slippery slope would have taken me there. But no one knows. I think that's something that a lot of people don't recognize. Like, well, I only watch porn for 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, and I hit it or whatever, hit it and quit it. And you're like, 15 becomes 20, 20 becomes 40, 40 is an hour, and then now you're in a weird spot, right? I had it in a different way. I had that addiction in a completely different way.
Yeah, it's one of those things. Kirk was talking about freedom, and I think that's something we as men need to be aware of, because we're not talking about sex trafficking or being a slave to that, just as the little boys and girls and the ones making the movies and stuff. You as men, we as men, myself included, is very slippery slope. You're like, oh, well, this is just easier. Oh, well, instead of going out and spending time and trying to meet a woman, oh, I'll just go over here to, this thing, or I'll just watch this online. It's easier, but that easier becomes your cage each time. And it becomes, you turn, you put each little bar in front of you, because it's like, oh, well, it's just easier. And that's the excuse that I hear a lot. And John and I were talking about it last time. It's just easier because women are so much, work, or they're so masculine now, or they're so this or that. Maybe I'll even go overseas to find a wife, whatever. But it's because we're so much looking for easy now, so much looking for that consumption mindset and that pleasure mindset, that we're not willing to put the work in. And when I used to run men's groups, a lot of the guys would talk about when they finally got off porn, or when they cut back, their masculinity went up, like the energy went up, because you're giving so much of that away through this 2-dimensional screen, where that energy could be used for, like Kurt was saying, producing something positive in the world. And if we can get 10 guys off of this podcast that can come together, and we can start making a difference, and that 10 guys get other 10 guys, and we can start making this exponential difference in the world to change ourselves for the better and the world for the better, by freeing ourselves from all of these little cages we've been putting ourselves in, because we're trying to make an easy life. We're being self-centered and pleasure seeking, instead of wanting to be a good man who's producing something of value for the future.
Yeah.
Dude, so I tell you what, man, let's bring this plane in for a landing here, which I know with the
you got
three of
places
us
to go.
Yeah, I got, but and I know with the three of us, this could be a long runway to land on. So just, I mean, what are each one of your kind of closing thoughts on the whole idea of men stepping away from being just consumers or just consumers in any kind of context? What's your takeaway from this conversation and the one we had a few days ago?
Kirk, I would say I love the fact that you say you're pro freedom. I think it's a little easier to just be like bad man, bad man, right? Mm-hmm. I like your approach of pro freedom, but there has to be the switch that happens in the man's mind and heart that says, I have this addiction or whatever. Here's what I consider, and I think therapists and other people consider this, is if you change your schedule to get what you want, could be addicted. If you're moving things and schedules so that you can get the massage or watch porn or do these things, if you're moving things in your schedule, there could be a level of addiction that you may not even quite be aware of. And so know that you are consuming something that matters to that child and that girl on the TV or that girl on the two-dimensional screen that Kirk's saying, 99% of the time doesn't want to be there. Just so you know, she's moaning and screaming because she's paid a little bit, not all of it, to do that. And she hates it, and she's puking off camera anyways because they're taking drugs and stuff to keep it going, just so you know. Edits, cuts, all that stuff. I love the pro freedom and the pro producing of the family, knowing that it is we are the purchasers, and if you don't purchase this, there is no company. And because of the supply and demand, we have to address the masculine purchasers, the non-masculine demand side, right? And being a protector and a provider, producing in your family, producing around your friends, being that producer of good and purpose makes a world of difference. And even if it's in your small community with you and a friend, or you and like your, whoever, you and your family, whatever, just get in there and do it. But be honest with yourself. Be really, really honest. And if you're for freedom, then work through that.
Yeah. I'll finish off with my, I think being pro freedom and being pro masculine, looking at yourself and realizing that if you're giving up interactions with human beings to go home and for the easier, like, well, I don't want to spend time with this, I'll just go home. And that's part of the isolation. It's part of what's making us less masculine and making us less manly. And and I speak from experience. I spent many years doing that, where it's like, oh, it's just easier to go home. I don't want to spend the time or the energy because this is an unknown and I might get rejected or whatnot. So as men, it's time for us to kind of start building those backbones again. And that takes lifting weights. It takes going out there and being rejected. It takes taking risks. It takes getting with other guys so that we know what we're producing, and getting with other guys that will tell you the truth. Like, why are you going home? What are you doing? Like, checking in. And we can do that for each other so that we become the best versions of men that we can be. And as we become the better versions of men that we can be, we raise the standard of our lives and the lives of those around us, which changes the world.
Absolutely.
So those are my 2 cents. And we run long, but Kirk, I want you to chime in, give us your last final.
Sure, man. What you consume, you gain an appetite for, and what you have an appetite for, you consume. And at some point, that cycle begins to consume you. And you got to understand that every screen is meant to monetize eyeballs in some kind of way. And so we got to understand that if you want to be on a screen, we're producing, an episode of a show here, a podcast here on a screen. Being in the mindset of creating and producing is the best place to be in terms of being proactive against the notion of consumption, because you can't ever love anything you consume, and you can't have intimacy or connection with anything you consume. And that even includes people in your life. And so the whole idea of consumption is something that is culturally in the Western world, especially in America. We even have something in our government called the consumer index. How well are we consuming stuff? And so we got to be able to get out of that. And it takes men to lead that effort. It takes men to lead that charge. It takes men to go in and be the hero that needs to show up in dark times, and we're living in dark times. So masculinity is the answer, I believe, to this problem. And so I love you guys. John, man, thanks so much, man.
Men need to lock arms and stand up. We need to lock arms and stand up, because sometimes we fall, but we need a man on each side to pick us up. And that's how we can move this needle forward, Kirk. I love that. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys.
We love you, man. I mean,
it's a conversation, so keep going.
And with that, Mad Men are
out.